People are talking about it on Twitter.
People have been talking about it on, well, I've only seen it on Twitter, so I can't say anywhere else. Maybe Discord. Amino? Does anybody use Amino? I'm pretty sure people use Amino. Anyways, Final Fest. It's happening. The Splatocalypse. I think they could have made a better name for that, but this is the one, and we're sticking with it. Now, the last final Splatfest that took place in Splatoon 1 actually had effects on its sequel, where whichever Squid Sister won, the other would go on to be brainwashed in the Splatoon 2 campaign. Which begs the question, does the Splatocalypse mean anything for the next game? And that's what this video is about. So let's dive right into it. Well, actually not right into it. Let's talk about the Splatfest in general first. First, let's get into the details of the Splatfest itself. The final Splatfest will be between teams Chaos and Order, and is about which world that you want the game's characters to inhabit. It will be a 3-day Splatfest, a first of its kind and the worst of its kind. I hate long Splatfests. Please, why did you do this, Nintendo? But it appears there will be a few unique features hinted at by the art made for the final Splatfest. On the art for the final fest, you can see on the side for Team Chaos, there is the Killer Whale, and on the side for Team Order, there is the Hyper Bomb from the final boss of the Splatoon 2 Octo expansion. Now, this pretty much all but confirms that those two special weapons will be associated with the two sides of the Splatfest, so we could expect those to be in the Shifty Station. This Splatfest will not only feature a new Shifty Station, but all Shifty Stations. I don't know how this will go. I mean, not all the Shifty Stations are great. Some of them are really good. Some of them are really bad. Most of them are meh. It could be neat. Also, after the Splatfest is over, the final update for the game, 5.0.0, will release, allowing people to play on Splatfest-based turf war matches, including night mode for all current stages and all Shifty Stations. This is great. Everyone's asked for this. I'm glad it's in. So that's it for the content. This Splatfest is looking like the most interesting one yet, although it is the longest, so I'm not exactly looking forward to it. But regardless, there's a lot to look forward to. However, I'm not just referring to the final Splatfest itself, but the potential for it to affect the next game, which we'll get into now. Now, before we dive into speculation, I want to cover the two main pieces of information that are heavily implied by given information in both the game and the announcement for the Final Fest. First, let's talk about the announcement. This Splatfest is clearly different from the other ones in terms of theme. The point I'm trying to get at is that every Splatfest before has been a sort of would you rather question. Or what's your favorite, such as do you like cake or ice cream? Do you like Inklings or Ocklings? Would you rather be able to time travel or teleport? But this Splatfest has a question that has no other like it. In the words of Nagami himself, what sort of a world would you wish for the Inklings and their friends? I feel like this is the heaviest implication that this will affect future events in the Splatoon universe. While the Splatfest question itself, what sort of a world would you rather live in, can be chalked up to be similar to all the other Splatfest questions, this line from Nogami is what makes me think that this will affect in-game events the most. Now on to some other information, data mined from the dialogue after the next Splatfest, the Narwhals vs. Unicorns. This is dialogue lead from the end of next week's Splatfest, and there are two lines in particular I want to draw attention to. The first is Pearl saying, "It's almost like the end is near." This all but confirms the Splatocalypse theme, and while I don't necessarily think it would imply an actual apocalypse happening, it's just a foreshadow for the Final Fest theme. But the next line is what makes me think about the future of the game more. Marina says to Pearl, "But whatever happens, we'll always have each other's backs, right?" And Pearl's answer is not clear. I just can't see that being a definitive answer from Pearl, and this tells me something. Whatever kind of event this is, it would most likely drive these two apart. That's all that's heavily implied by the game and Nogami. Now let's move on to some serious speculation, because I have some wild theories as to where this game's headed. It is highly likely that the final Splatfest will have some effect on Splatoon 3, but what that is isn't exactly clear. However, the Splatocalypse theme indicates that whatever this change is, it could be on a level of the entire Splatoon world. In fact, I'd like to think that this Splatfest itself is actually implying an apocalyptic event. And so I came up with multiple theories as to how exactly the world could end, with air quotes, because if the world actually ended, there wouldn't be a game to play. But leave it in a state where whatever sort of world that the Inklings would live in, chaos or order, would actually matter. And so here are the three forces that I think could trigger a world-ending, in air quotes, event in the Splatoon universe. The most likely, in my mind, are the Salmonids. It's already implied by a sunken scroll in the game from what's called in the game a. It's already implied by a sunken scroll in the game by what is called the Book of Madai that the Salmonid are an apocalyptic level force, stating that the pinkfish will emerge from the sea and destroy all creatures of the land. That was from memory, so the quote wasn't 100% correct. It'll be on the screen right now, though. But it's clear that, according to the game, the Salmonid are an apocalyptic force, and they can cause severe damage to the mainland of Splatoon 2. Now, this is just one sunken scroll, and sunken scrolls have never really impacted the game's lore in such a serious way. So I feel like there needed to be a bit more evidence, and there are a few points I would like to bring up. The first is on the Final Fest art itself. As you can see, the many major characters of Splatoon 2 are aligned with chaos or order depending on who they are as characters. For example, it makes sense that Sea Cucumber is with the side of order because he's an authority figure. As for Spike, he's dependent on a legally dodgy system of selling clothes, so it would make sense he's on the side of chaos. I don't want to go into details of all of the characters on each side because some of them honestly don't make any sense to me. But there is one I want to bring up, Mr. Grizz. He's on the bottom of the poster and his little radio is knocked over. Now, not only is he on the bottom of the poster, but he's in the middle. This would most likely imply that he's not on either side of this Splatfest conflict. So, whatever role he plays is not only neutral, but most likely influential in some way to the game's events. This poster could also be used as evidence against the Salmonid being a major force causing the end of the world, since the Salmonid are aligned with chaos. But I want to focus on Mr. Grizz here, since it seems like he has a bit more of an important role in this entire piece of promotional art. So in this poster, Mr. Grizz being knocked over implies to me that he's defeated in some way. Now, this could be multiple interpretations, whether it's his employees rising against him or the Salmonids getting past his employees. But from what I see from Mr. Grizz as a character, is that he's fighting back the Salmonid force. Because his employees are the only thing fighting Salmonids in the game, and the game's already stated through Sunken Scrolls that Salmonid are very malicious creatures. So if Mr. Grizz's defenses presumably fail against the Salmonid, that could trigger the end of the world that the Splatocalypse is implying. So we have two pieces of evidence for the Salmonid. Mr. Grizz's position in the poster, which is very situational, and the Sunken Scroll that states the Salmonids are a threat to all living creatures. This is the most likely one in my eyes, since the other two that I'm going to bring up seem to have problems with them causing the destruction of the world. So for now, my idea for what's going to play out in Splatocalypse is that the Salmonid are going to overrun the mainland, and what's left of the world is going to be dependent on whether Chaos or Order wins in the Splatfest. Now on to the next possible cause of the end of the world, the Octolings. Now, this is the least likely one in my eyes, because the Octolings have never been a serious threat in both Splatoon games, since both were stopped by just one agent of the Squidbeak Splatoon. But it's entirely possible they could come back and somehow invade the overworld. If that sort of conflict happened, then there would definitely be split groups in the world of Splatoon. Now again, the reason I don't think this is happening is because one agent has always been successful at stopping the Noctarian army. So I don't think that they would be this force. However, given Nintendo's use of them in every single-player campaign and most of the game's lore, I don't want to leave this out as an option, even though it seems unlikely to me. The final potential end to the world that I can see happening would be from a sort of timeline split. If you know about the Legend of Zelda timeline, there is a timeline of games that occurs if Link failed to defeat Ganon in Ocarina of Time. This isn't usually considered a scenario in most games' history. Like, if Mario failed to stop Bowser, there wouldn't be any of the Mario games. But it does matter in Legend of Zelda's timeline, so it creates a series of games, including Link to the Past and A Link Between Worlds. Now, this wouldn't be too plausible since he's defeated by Agent 8. The fact that the game over screen for the Tartar boss fight is unique and very detailed in showing the end of the world makes me think that that's a possibility for Splatoon 3's story. Knowing that Nintendo's gone out of their way to create a detailed ending scenario for if Tartar wins that boss fight makes me think a timeline split could be possible. One final note I'd like to add about the potential for an apocalypse is that there are other minor events that could cause a global level event. For example, tides rising. Splatoon's lore is based on humans being wiped out by global warming and the sea levels rising. It is also stated in Inkling lore that the sea levels rising caused the conflict between Inklings and Octolings. This theme could continue in the story and cause a conflict based on rising sea levels in Splatoon 3, where different factions are formed for the future of Inkopolis based on the remaining land left. There are also plenty other possibilities, such as a meteor hitting the Splatoon world, or just some global event. It could be anything. There could be a much less lore-related reason for this Splatocalypse to happen, and I want to bring up that possibility. Because a Salmonid or Tartar-based scenario, for example, aren't purely the only possibilities just because they exist in the game and they do pose a threat to the game's world. That's pretty much it for this video. Just one last recap of what we're going over. Because the first final Splatfest in Splatoon 1 changed the outcome of Splatoon 2's story, it is likely that the Splatocalypse theme of the final Splatfest of Splatoon 2 implies possible changes to Splatoon 3's lore based on its outcome. It is heavily implied by Nogami that this Splatfest will affect what kind of worlds the Inklings, Octolings, and other creatures will inhabit in the next game. And by the leaked Splatfest dialogue, whatever this event is will drive Parla Marina apart. There are 3 potential apocalyptic forces that could trigger this event: the Salmonids, the Octolings, and Tartar and the NILS statue. However, each of them have potential problems with them, and there are other smaller events that could trigger an apocalypse in Splatoon. So most of those possibilities are purely speculation, but there is evidence to each side that is worth considering. Thank you guys so much for watching. I know I've never done a video like this before, but due to the recent announcement of Splatocalypse, I did want to discuss some topics that could relate to the game's future and the final Splatfest itself. I will be making a Splatfest supercut for the Splatocalypse Splatfest, so expect that sometime. But there's no way in hell I'm going to make a normal Splatfest video. I could honestly care less. Let me know down in the comments what you guys think is going to happen in Splatoon 3, and I'll see you guys next time. Thanks for watching.